Hi, I've got a tip for you to help you save some money and get a better air cooler. How do you do that, you say? Well, you can do it one of two ways. The first way is to save money by waiting for a discounted product. Like, for example, I have this Noctua NHG 15S, and I only paid $54.96 for it. That's a deal. How can I say that's a deal? Well, I just looked on Amazon and Newegg, the top two places that I usually look for products. I guess I should also look on eBay. We'll just do that, right? The thing of it is it's hard to find good places that you can buy stuff on and you can actually trust that you're not going to get ripped off. I mean, you can even get ripped off on Amazon and Newegg and some of these other websites. But oh my. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't want to listen to the sirens. So the cheapest that I could find it on eBay, brand new, was $80, and that's pretty interesting. So the interesting thing is that you don't have to buy a whole cooler. All right, you don't have to wait for a discounted price necessarily. Here's what you really have to do. You have to figure out what kind of heat sink you need. How many heat pipes do you need? So you can look and say, okay, do I want to be able to use this in the future? Because the heat sink, this part here, can be used almost indefinitely as long as it's not poor quality. If it's been assembled the wrong way, if it's been soldered or welded the wrong way, if it's got defective heat pipes, obviously those are things that can happen, but they're very rare. There are not very many instances of these devices failing. What fails eventually is the fans. So you can go out and find the best heat sink, just this part, this whole thing here, and you can search for one that will be able to be used in the future for even hotter CPUs than you've got right now. So usually you're going to want to go for a heatsink where you've got direct contact between the pipes and the CPU. This is actually a cold plate. It's still very good, just not quite as good as if this was direct contact, which means you'd actually see the pipes running across here instead of this solid plate. There are advantages to having a solid plate because the manufacturer hopefully has been able to make it more uniform in depth than, say, if it's direct contact with the pipes. So that can mitigate some of the problems associated with differences in depth. Okay. So you also want to look at, what are the pipes made of? Are they made with copper? Are they made with aluminum? What kind of material is made? Because that does play a role in it. Also, you want to look at the distance between the fins and how many fins there are. And you also want to pay attention. Look at this over here. This is probably so that it doesn't run into RAM on this side. But you want to make sure that physically, whatever heatsink you buy is going to be able to be mounted on your CPU without obstructing RAM. And if you do not want to have to remove your CPU cooler in order to make changes to your computer, like if you want to put it in an SSD in the top M2 slot on your motherboard, it's some heatsinks like this NHG15S are so large that they're going to get in the way, and you're going to have to take it off in order to put something in that slot. Keeping in mind that with some motherboards, when you use that slot, and if you've also got a graphics card installed, it's going to slow down the speed of the graphics card PCIe slot. That said, basically you want to look and make sure that it's going to fit and it's going to be strong enough not only for the CPU you've got right now, but CPUs in the future. And keep in mind that may require you getting a contact frame, or for AMD an offset frame, because AMD's newer CPUs have their, instead of having their chips that produce the most heat centered in the middle, they're offset onto the bottom, I guess you could say. So that's the first thing. Once you have sourced a great heatsink, your next step is find out what the distance is in here. Now, this one in particular has got clearance of about 27 millimeters, and this one has clearance of 35 millimeters. This is actually the Montech Metal D24 base. Now, they call it base because the premium one has LEDs. I don't give a crap about LEDs. They don't help performance. And I don't look at the computer case while I'm using the computer unless I'm seeing if there's a problem or something. Or I'm really bored. I'm looking at the light. Oh, so pretty. No, it's all useless stuff. So, yeah, you get a fan that'll fit in here, number one. Number two, you find fans that have the highest static pressure possible. Now, the airflow is also important, but because you're pushing air through an array of fins, you need to have high pressure. Now, for example, on this one, the pressure of the fans is, oh gosh, I'm going to have to look that up. It's not even listed on the box, which is really annoying. So it has a static pressure with the standard fans, which are these nice Montech fans. I'm not sure what kind these are, if they're Montech Metal or if they're a custom one for the heatsink, but they have a static pressure of 2.82 mmAQ. For those of you who don't know what that means, mmAQ is a measurement of how far the fans can push water up a column, and that means mm is millimeters, and AQ could also be mmH2O, so that's a measurement of how many millimeters of displacement of the water in the tube by the fan. So it can displace water 2.82 millimeters, which is not a lot if you think about water. That's that's 2.82 millimeters. Let's see. So if we go 1, 2, it's like that much. It's a really small amount. However, in terms of pushing air, that's significant. It is standard for a lot of the more powerful fans, especially those that are designed for heat sinks, to have static pressure between 2 and 3 mmAQ. It's not the best, but it does a good job. Now, if you want to really pump up the power of your CPU cooler, irregardless of what the specifications for it by default are, you can replace or ignite, just like I said, just get the heatsink and buy different fans that are much more powerful. Okay, so if you're looking for other fans, I can give you some examples to help you. Okay, so I'm going to give some examples of fans that have higher than normal static pressure that will be better to use on a heatsink or a radiator for that matter. Because the advice I'm giving you applies just as well if you buy a radiator with the tubes and pumps already connected, and then you buy the fans separately. So the first one on the list is the Cooler Master Mobius OC. Now you can get the 120 if your heatsink or radiator takes it. You can get the 140 as well. This one has a static pressure. So there are 3 settings for this fan. On the low and medium settings, the lowest setting is only 1.19, medium is 2.76, but high is 4.75 mmAQ. So that's pretty good. That's like about almost double the average heatsink fan, 4.75. Now the next one is the Be Quiet Silent Wings Pro 4. It also comes in 140 size, but for this one it also comes in 3 different speeds. And the maximum pressure on this one, it doesn't give me the information for the other 2 settings, but for the maximum pressure it's 5.31. So that's double the average heatsink fan. The next one, this will be hard to find because I think this is discontinued, is the EK Furious Vardar Evo. And this one has a maximum pressure of 5.81 mmAQ. So that's another good choice. Now we're looking at, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, keep in mind that these are generally thicker than 25 millimeters. Now the Cooler Master Mobius OC is 25 millimeters thick, and I believe that this Be Quiet is also 25 millimeters thick, and this one is also 25 millimeters thick. Now we're looking at the Phanteks T30. That one is going to be 30 millimeters thick. So I wouldn't be able to use it in the middle here on this one. However, that's okay. If I wanted to get 2 T30s, I could mount one on this side and I could mount one on this side, leave the middle empty. It's still going to work. Is it going to be as good? I don't know. I haven't tested that possibility yet. But 30 millimeters gives you, let's see, low speed is 1.27, medium speed is 3.3 mmAQ, high speed is 7.11. Wow. Yeah, that's almost 3 times faster than the average heatsink fan. But there's better than that even. And this isn't even the strongest one that I've got. This one is also difficult to get. It's the EK Furious Melt-to-Me. It's also discontinued. And this one, despite the fact that it has a thickness of 38. So even with this NH-D15S, I wouldn't be able to put it in the middle. I'd have to put it on the sides. This one has a static pressure of 7.13 mmAQ. So what's the difference between this and this one? Well, this one has 0.02 mmAQ better than this one, which is not significant enough to try to hunt this one down. Get this one instead. Also, in terms of airflow, this has got 101. This has got 121 CFM. So it's not significant enough to worry about either. Which in metric would be 171.4 versus 205 cubic meters per hour. Then sound level. This one has a maximum of 39.7. This one, however, is 60.9 dBA. So this is really loud. Even in your case, you're going to notice it. You might not notice this one so much, but when this one's whirring around in your case, it doesn't matter. It's not mounted on the side of the case and it's on a heatsink. You're going to hear this one for sure, whereas you might not hear this one. That is pretty insane. And there are other differences in terms of these two fans. One of the nice things about this one is the cabling allows you to daisy chain fans. So those are some other options. The strongest one I have, I think, does 11 mmAQ. But again, it's a very noisy fan. So just to recap, find a good quality heatsink that has enough heat pipes and is a good design, solid, reliable. Doesn't have to be expensive, okay? It can be cheap or it can be expensive. If you've got the money to buy the best one on the market, go for it, and then buy the best fans you can possibly find. And please pay attention to the bearings. If it says the MTTF or MTBF, which is the how long it's expected to last, a mean time to failure or mean time before failure, is say 40,000 hours, that's probably a sleeve bearing, which starts out very quiet and gets progressively noisier before it abruptly stops when it dies because it seizes. And so those are not particularly good over the long term. The next ones would be the rifle bearings, and they have somewhat better duration than the sleeve bearings. Like that Be Quiet fan, that uses rifle bearings. Or not the Be Quiet, I'm sorry. There's another Be Quiet, Pure Wings 2. Pure Wings 2, and that uses rifle bearings that have an MTTF of 80,000 hours. Still, eventually it's going to get louder, and when it stops, it's going to seize up and stop working. And then the next one is the standard ball bearing, single ball bearing, which means it's a mixture of, say, a sleeve or a rifle and a ball bearing system. And so those are, it all depends on the weakest link, and the weakest link is going to be that sleeve or rifle bearing. So they'll last a bit longer, but not really great. Better off getting the dual ball bearings, and those can last maybe 100,000 hours. So you can use this technique for air coolers. You can also use it for water coolers. I figured this out when I was looking at an EK360 Elite, which has push-pull fans. So it has fans on both sides of the radiator. And I was looking at the statistics for it, and I realized that push-pull wasn't doing very much good. And part of the problem with that push-pull was simply the fact that the fans that they had put on there weren't that good in the first place. So I thought about it, and I realized, well, you could take off the extra fans and use them in the case, or you could just get better fans. So again, you can do it one of two ways. You can go piece by piece and buy a radiator that fits your setup, and then buy tubing and cut it and attach it to the, as you need it, and then buy the water block or the pump block, whatever you want to call it, separately. And that way you can get the best quality. Now, ideally you want to get a radiator that is made with copper. Most radiators are made with aluminum these days, but copper is better at transferring heat. Also, you want to make sure that the cold plate is copper and or copper with nickel plating on it, and that'll do really well. As for lighting absolutely does not matter. It's completely up to you. So you can also look at what kind of lighting will this provide. Does it provide just a white light that's going to light up my case a little bit more? Does it have a single color? Does it have multiple colors? Does it have ARGB? That's all up to you. It's not important as far as performance. I'm talking about performance here. So whether you buy everything individually, and if you buy the radiator, another thing you can look for and see is if there's a fill port, like this one has a fill port. And that allows you, as the fluids get low, you can top off the fluids by, I can tilt it and get the excess air that has built up in here, because the tubing is made from porous material, and over time the liquid in here evaporates through the tubing out into the air. It's through osmosis. So you will get more and more air in here. Now, depending on how you mount this, you could have problems with this not working right. So ideally you want to have it like this, and the reason I say that is because this way the pump will push all air into here, and it'll go into the fan at the bottom here, and then it'll go all the way up to the top, and as it gets worse and worse, it will just sit there in the top, and very little and no air will be stuck in the pump. If you mount it this way, same thing, but the air is going to be here. So eventually you're going to have a problem where the water is not going to be able, in my opinion, to get out as easily. It's going to take more effort from the pump to be able to continuously pump water in and out of this thing. Now, the one thing you never want to do is have it where the pump is at a level like this, where air is going to tend to want to go into the pump and get stuck there, because that's the highest point. Liquids rise, and even with the pressure in here, you're still going to have some air get stuck up in here. If enough air gets stuck up in here, it can cause the bearings, which are usually ceramic, to dry out. And that's bad, because whether it's ceramic bearings or it's magnetic levitation bearings or whatever, you don't want it to overheat, because when it overheats, eventually it's going to break, or it's going to seize up. And either way, that's bad, no matter what kind of bearings you have in here. So always make sure that when you mount it, if possible, if you're doing a top mount like this, it doesn't really matter. Okay, it's the air is all going to be stuck up here at the very top. But if you're going to do a side mount or a front mount or whatever, then you always want to make sure that the head is lower than the position of the tubing. Now, some of the AIOs that I've got have a pump fitted right here. So you're also going to want to take that into consideration, because you don't want air to be accumulating where that pump is if it's on the tubes. And again, ideally safer to go like this. That way air can't accumulate where a pump on the tubes is, or a pump on the there are pumps mounted into the radiator as well. So in that case, you also want to consider that. Now, once you've got your perfect radiator, perfect tube lengths, and be careful to measure your tube lengths to make sure that you can actually get it from the head to the radiator without trouble. The reason I say this is because my first AIO, which I bought, was a frozen knot, and it's got from Thermarite, and it's got 450 millimeter long tubes, and this is, I think, 410. And I tried to side mount it, and my graphics card was in the way. I can't even do it on the front either. So I actually had to buy a vertical mount for my graphics card so that I would be able to mount my AIO with the tubes down. So always keep that in mind. If you're going to buy stuff that's pre-built, you may have that challenge where you may have to increase the length or even replace the tubing, which can be problematic depending on how it was designed. You may end up wrecking the connectors on both sides, so you'd be better off cutting the tubes, adding an extension in, and reattaching them firmly with barbs. With barbs. So yeah, and be careful to treat your radiator nicely, because these fins get damaged easily. There are other factors as far as choosing radiators is concerned, like the density of the fin array, as well as the thickness, and obviously the size in terms of what will fit into your case. If you're desperate, you can mount it on the outside of your case where it isn't even obstructing the flow of air in and out. Therefore, theoretically, you can have it completely independently dispersing heat from your case without affecting your case at all, and then you can have fans blowing air in and out to keep everything inside the case cool, which, at least in theory, would be better. But some people don't want to do that. Either they don't have space for it, or they think it looks ugly, or maybe they don't have tubes that are long enough, and that's certainly a consideration. But if you can manage that, theoretically, you're going to achieve even better cooling. Now, once you've got the pump, the tubes, and the radiator, you can then proceed to look at the fans. And like I pointed out the fans earlier, there's the Cooler Master Mobius OC, the Fantex T30, the EK Furious Vardar, and the Furious Meltemi, and there are several others as well that have much stronger static pressure to help blow. I don't really recommend doing a push-pull configuration, and that's simply because what you get is generally going to be far less than just buying really fantastic fans. Now, you can experiment with this on your own and let me know what your results are, but this is my theory. I haven't had the chance to experiment with it yet, but my theory is that having really strong fans on your radiator are going to be much more effective than doubling up on the fans, because you lose a lot through the doubling, because the second fan in line on the other side of the radiator acts as both additional power, but actually also as a barrier, and that can be bad, obviously. So, but again, this is a way for you to get the best possible air or water cooler. Now, oh yeah, one other thing, when you're looking at pumps, especially if you're buying a pre-built, if you're going to look at the pumps, or when you're looking at the pumps, I should say, make sure you look at the flow rate. If you can't find out the flow rate, then look at the RPMs of the pump. Now, unfortunately, there are some companies that don't give, actually, most companies don't give the flow rate. It's very frustrating. You may have to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm considering buying this from you, but you don't publish your flow rate. I need to know what the flow rate is, and or the RPMs as well. And don't worry about what the fans are. As long as you've got the static pressure of the fans, you know, and whether the bearings are good bearings or bad bearings. And that's what I didn't get to finish talking about earlier because I got distracted by a phone call. But yeah, as long as you've got a high-powered pump that's made with high-powered high-quality bearings and good quality materials and stuff, you're going to have an excellent setup that will beat most any all-in-one cooler on the market, simply because you've taken the best of everything and put it all together. Okay, to continue about the bearings. After sleeve and rifle and mixed ball bearing is the dual ball bearings. Dual ball bearings should last you about 100,000 hours. If I remember correctly, they're best vertically mounted, whereas the rifle and sleeve I believe can do vertical and horizontal. Vertical and horizontal. But keep in mind that with the rifle and sleeve bearing and the mixed ball bearing, depending on which side is up, you may have oil slowly leaking out of the hub, which is what causes them to eventually seize out because they're not fully sealed. Now, then you go into the hydraulic bearings. There are static ones and there are dynamic ones. What you want to do ideally is find the ones that actually have a pump built inside of the fan that keeps the static pressure constant. Those are called hydrostatic fans or hydrostatic bearings because they use a tiny pump somewhere inside of the fan to keep the pump, the liquid pressure the same, and that also is designed so it doesn't leak. Now, if you get hydrodynamic fan bearings, it's different because it has circulating oil. Like with the rifle fan bearings, the rifling in there, kind of like the rifling inside of the barrel of a gun or rifle, the rifling actually helps to distribute the fan's oil throughout. It keeps it circulating. With a hydrostatic fan, a pump keeps it all circulating. So that is ideal. You're going to pay more for it because number one, it's got more parts in it, so it's got that pump, and number two, it's sealed, so it's not going to leak oil, which makes it ideal. One of the best bearings that I'm aware of is the SS02 or SSO2 from Noctua, but there are other companies out there that have great fan bearings as well. Some of them can last in excess of 200, even 300,000 hours. And that's what you want to look for. So fluid dynamic bearings, you should see in excess no less, if it's anything less than 100,000 hours mean time to failure or MTTF, whatever, that is not a good fan bearing. That's a crap fan bearing and you should stay away from it. So keep this in mind, yeah. Getting back to the pump, you want to make sure high flow, and that's usually can be indicated by the RPMs. So when you're looking for an all-in-one and you're not planning on doing anything other than maybe replacing the fans, get the best pump you can from that brand and then swap the fans out. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or comments, and sorry about the constant interruptions from the phone, please leave comments down below. Please remember always to be civil. I have no respect for people who have no respect for people on the internet and try to troll and insult. So, if you want to get yourself banned from my channel, then, be rude. Otherwise, be civil. So, thanks again for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day. Please like, subscribe, and share.